Welcome to Yerba Mate Talks.
Welcome to Share by Mate Talks. We are continuing our series on changing our mind. And so we are going to go ahead and jump right in to reviewing the book that we have. We've got a few more chapters. So we're going to go ahead and discuss those chapters. And when those chapters are done, we'll kind of pivot from there. So if you want to talk to me about changing my mind about something, maybe you heard me on another stream you'd like to discuss or debate or discuss changing your mind, or maybe there's a complete other subject, I put the link in the chat, so you are welcome to jump in. Hey, Peter, glad to see you here. So glad to have a few people here, be able to kind of review the book. I think this chapter was quite interesting. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So we're in chapter 8 of this book, and the book is called How Minds Change by David McRaney. And so he starts out with this book he starts out with this chapter with the difference between beliefs and attitudes. And this first little section is a little isolated. It doesn't connect with all the other sections incredibly well. A little bit, you'll kind of see how it kind of does. But he starts out saying, well, we have kind of these beliefs often where facts that we think are true. But then we not only have the facts that we think are true, but we have we have attitudes about things. So we have things that we think are true, yes, but then we also have a general attitude. And so when we are debating things, sometimes it may be more important to think about influencing someone's attitude, or they're shifting their attitude about something more than it would be about their belief. So if you're going to like discuss gay marriage with them, they might have, and let's say they're really against it or something, they might have a really negative attitude toward it. And so anything you throw their way, um, they're just going to be super, against it. But um, so you're not really going to change their mind with probably facts at this point until you kind of change their attitude about it. The next thing he goes into is he introduces this idea of elaboration likelihood model, ELM, I think is the acronym he uses for it. And this is where people process persuasive messages in either two ways. Now, I assume this is just, you know, our best chance at trying to describe this, that, if there's two, there's three, if there's three, there's four, kind of an idea. But he describes it in the research that they use sort of two ways people describe it. And one is way that people might process persuasive messages is a central route, which is like careful, super detailed evaluation of the situation, and like what's going on, and like, okay, I'm really going to think about this, I'm really going to consider, I'm going to evaluate all the facts, I'm going to check things out. That's like the central route. And the other way that we will evaluate persuasive messages is the peripheral route. And that's just like relying on cues and heuristics or whatever. And that could be as simple as something like, hey, I heard a football player sell something one other time and it didn't work, so I know this doesn't work either. Very low effort. You just say, oh, I saw an ad, and a football player was on that ad, and I bought that product, didn't work, and now I know all products ever hawked by football players are junk. You know, and that could just be a heuristic that gets you through. You don't do carefully. You don't say, well, just because the last product stunk, maybe this product is good. Why was the last product bad? What made it bad? What's going to make this one good? You're not doing the central route. You're not taking careful evaluation. You're just sort of relying on cues. You're just kind of relying on that. Of course, your background is going to be huge on that. How you've been raised, and you're going to fall back to common sense. And unfortunately, common sense is just whatever you've been told, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, there's kind of no such thing as common sense. So many things that we thought were common sense weren't exactly that true. And so you want to be careful about the peripheral route. Now, you say to yourself, well, this peripheral route, why did we ever get a hold of this? How can we have this peripheral route? And in a situation where you need to evaluate something really quick, maybe you're in danger, you're out in the savannah and you're in trouble, this sort of really quick evaluation and not having to like super consider everything is incredibly valuable for survival and making quick decisions. So it does have an incredible benefit, but it really stinks as far as saying, well, I'm going to like to consider whether I'm going to change my mind or not, because you're just going to kind of fit it into your normal belief system if you go along this peripheral route. He also mentions the heuristic system model and HSM. So the ELM was the first one I was talking about there, and then he talks about the HSM, the heuristic system model, and it's a complement to the ELM, and it shows that people use both quick and deeper simultaneously. Like I said, it could get complicated. I'm sure researchers are going to learn more and more about this, but there's probably times where they get uh they get both types of reasoning get used. But whether persuasion sticks depends on the route, and the central route generates more enduring changing attitudes. The peripheral route gives faster but weaker change. So if you want to be able to change your own mind, you got to be kind of willing to send it down this central route. Hey, Max, good to see you here today. Always glad that when you can join the afternoon stream. So good to have you here, sir. And if anybody wants to call in through the link in the chat, if you want to hit me on a debate, I cannot go any longer than about uh, uh, 45 after, so I can only stream for sure about 45 minutes. So if you want to jump in now. We can make sure we get a chance to chat. But the next thing he talks about is motivation and ability to process. So McRaney highlights that for someone to engage with the message via the central route, they must have the motivation. So they have to put in effort. So if you want something to go down the central route so you can really kind of think about and decide whether you're going to change your mind, you have to be like motivated to do it. You have to want to do it. It's not easy, just being able to use heuristics and the peripheral thing. That's just you can just, low effort, but you have to want to be able to do it. And the next thing you have to have is the ability to do it. Say, well, what do you mean the ability? Like you're too stupid not to do it? Well, too stupid in the sense that you don't understand the material well enough. Yes, but not just that, but you have to have the time. Are you going to thoughtfully consider and be willing to take the time? The cognitive resources, do you have the energy? Because, using your brain takes a ton of energy. That's humans. We use a ton of our energy using our brain. Do you have that? Do you have the clarity? Are you just going to be able to get there and do it? So if you're going to really change your mind about something I hadn't thought about much until I read this chapter was, if I'm going to consider a subject and really want to know the answer and want to have like a deep thought about it, I maybe should not even consider talking with someone about it or researching it unless I have the time and sort of the energy resources in order to be able um to do it, to be able to handle it. And so I think that is a really important thing to consider, because in order to engage in this sort of deep thing, you have to have the motivation and you have to have the ability. Um, when you don't have the motivation, when you don't have the ability, either one or not enough of either, we often shift toward these peripheral cues. And so what starts mattering? Speaker credibility. Oh yeah, I trust my preacher, or I trust this streamer that I've watched 100 times, and if this streamer says it, I've agreed with him in the past, and so I'm just going to agree with him this time, right? And so you'll end up leaning on speaker credibility. You'll lean on emotional imagery. Some of the, if you they tug at the emotions, you'll really move towards that as well. And you won't really consider the strength of the argument. You're just going to sort of switch to emotional imagery or speaker credibility, these peripheral clues that we talked about. So, um, this I think this is quite interesting that not only do we need to think about that if we're trying to persuade someone else, but we need to think about that for ourselves as well. We need to be thinking both of those ways. If we really think something's valuable, we want to change someone's mind, we need to change their attitude. We need to get them thinking deeply about something and trying to discuss with them or change their attitude or beliefs when they're busy, when they don't have time, when they don't have the resources, when they aren't really able to consider it, might not be the time to bring it up. So if you really want to convince someone of something, maybe you have to be really careful about which time you decide to bring it up, because if they don't have the motivation or ability to do it, it's not going to happen. So he goes on to technique rebuttal versus topic rebuttal. So he explains a couple, very broad approaches. So topic rebuttal is responding to content of someone's arguments with facts slash counterfacts. So, a lot of debates are this way. You have facts, you have counterfacts, and you can just, hit them with the facts, And I always think of flat Earth debates when I see this, and a lot of times these debates do revolve around, just facts and debating whether something's true based on research and whatnot. And of course, it rarely works as far as changing people's minds. Then you have another one, technique rebuttal, and it's addressing the way someone reasons, their mindset, that how confident they are of something, rather than just simply their conclusions. So instead of just debating their conclusions, you go maybe a little step deeper on, why is it that you think this, and why do you have this attitude, and you know, um, what brought you here, what made you decide that this is true. And so persuasion is often better achieved by guiding someone to examine how they came to their beliefs rather than just giving them evidence. So ironically, asking them why they got to where they are, even just in a curious way where you don't actually rebuttal with any evidence at all, can sometimes end up being a more effective way of changing people's minds than throwing more facts at them. Which is why kind of when we started this series, I kind of said, "Oh, it's, we make our decisions based on emotions." And maybe that's sort of broadly true, but that's obviously sort of a big sweeping statement. Whereas, if we're drilling down, it looks like the research is saying, yes, we it's not just as simple as saying emotions. We carefully consider things sometimes during the central pathway, and the way to convince each other of things is sometimes addressing how we got somewhere, what was the method that we got there, how sure we are, and if we think about that, we might be more likely than changing our mind rather than just arguing some facts. And so I just got a couple more things on this chapter that we're going to address today. So if anybody wants to jump in the thing, we can chat a little bit. Otherwise, I may wrap up early. Either way is fine. But persuasion as self-persuasion. So the author thinks that effective persuasion happens when people convince themselves. Now, have you ever been in a situation where you're like arguing with somebody, or you've been debating a subject, and maybe you've debated it multiple times over a long period of time, and you're like confident you're right, and you're confident they're wrong, you're discussing, and then you return to a subject. A lot of times it happens when there's time in between, like you discuss the same subject and there's been space in between. And the person says, "Oh, I agree with what you're saying. That's what I've always believed, and that's what I've always been saying." And you're like, "No, it isn't. You can't even remember what you used to think. You're now agreeing with me. I've been arguing about this with you for like weeks, and you've been arguing back. And now you're going to jump in and claim you've always agreed with me? I've put in all this effort. I've argued with you. I've suggested this. I've suggested that. I've done this. I've done that. And you just feel completely exasperated that they finally changed their mind, but they won't admit it. They just claim that they've always thought that. And I've had that happen to me before, and I'm like super upset about it. And I think I probably need to take a different approach. If people, even if we've fooled ourselves into thinking that we changed our own mind, or we've always thought that way, I think it's a good sign that the way we persuaded was useful, because self persuasion is the best way to convince someone of something. Let people reflect on the evidence, let people reflect on what they're doing, and they are going to be more likely to change. So for the people, the Westboro Baptist Church people, it's just like, well, what about these passages? Have you thought about this? Or, do you think about how this makes sense? Or this really nice person that disagrees with you, why do you think they're such a wonderful people that you really like? And yet think they are so terrible, and so on and so forth. So self-reflection, I think, is a good thing to help people do. It's a good thing for us to do. And then if we self-reflect, even if this self-reflection sort of guided by some questions or discussion, I think it's a really good way to change our minds. um, so when you're trying to persuade somebody of something, you almost don't want to think of it as a debate to be won. You want to think of it like a shared inquiry into beliefs and values, right? So part of the reason I would get so upset when someone said, I've always believed that, was because it's like, I've done all this work to convince you, and now you're taking away my sweet victory by claiming you've always thought that. And that would be super frustrating. Well, why is that? Because I'm thinking of it like a debate, like an argument that I should win. And we shouldn't be thinking about it, even if we're in a debate, or quote unquote debate, or whatever. We shouldn't necessarily think about it as something we win, but we're trying to think of it as an inquiry where we're getting to the truth. And obviously, if you're convinced of your side, you think the inquiry is going to end up showing that you're right. But maybe the inquiry ends up showing that you're wrong. But you certainly want to kind of frame it in your mind, and the way that you have the discussion, or the way that you have the argument, as an inquiry, not a debate. If you just want to do debate and score points, I think that's super fine. That's just when you're doing it that way, you're you're doing it for fun. You're probably not going to convince people too much. You're doing it for the sake of the audience. Hey, Isa, look at you in the car, still joining the stream. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, brother. I'm glad. I have just been rushing, but I said I will get here as soon as I can.
Great to have you. So yeah, I've
Thank
just been
you.
kind of reviewing the chapter on the book, and I think it's been interesting. Kind of talking about, you probably didn't catch the beginning, but talking about how when we think about things, sometimes we just rest on heuristics, like, oh, they're trustworthy, or they're someone I've trusted before, or this fits in with my current paradigm, and that's sort of the quick way that we make decisions, and we do that all the time, and it has its uses. But then there's this other way we make decisions, which is like careful, thoughtful pathway, which of course we need some ability to be able to do. We need to have the understanding of the topic. We need to have the energy to be able to do. We have to have the time to be able to seriously consider it. And of course, we need to be able to have the motivation. We have to want to be able to do it, because we're going to put all this effort in. And so when we're considering changing our mind, or hoping someone else is going to change their mind, we need to end up on the central path, because the heuristic thing is for or quick stuff. We just, okay, oh yeah, well, dark alleys are a bad idea normally, so I'm just gonna not go down. I'm not gonna think too hard about it. That kind of thing.
I wanted to share something interesting with you. So
Yeah.
I'm doing another program. I'm a perpetual student, but I'm studying business too, because I was something that I wanted to edge out. Like I'd spent so much of my time studying humanities, so I wanted to kind of get some more kind of practical skills. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Hmm.
sure you know what I mean. Like when you're a pastor, you that's similar to like humanities field,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
like learning math, learning computer science, like these things are very useful skills that can help us like when other work does not shine through. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm studying social work and I'm studying business. I'm studying healthcare management and legal studies. So I'm studying kind of like law. And one of
Hmm.
my classes I'm taking is called Detecting Financial Crimes. And it's an
Okay.
amazing class. You mentioned this. There's you mentioned about affinity kind of grouping, and it was really fascinating because uh one of the things is there's a thing called affinity fraud where people have we study a lot about fraud and how people take advantage of other people and you know and how there's this thing called the fraud triangle, which is motivation or pressure, opportunity and rationalization. So basically when a person has like a pressure or a motivation, like for example they have a bill and they can't pay the bill, and then there's like an opportunity, like they have an open door to like a cash register where they can get money.
Mhm.
They can get that money, and then they rationalize, hey, it was okay to take that money,
Mm.
because there's more money that's out there. I'm only taking a little bit, right? There's a
Right,
lot of
right.
things
You'll
that you
never miss it or whatever you justify.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And so what was interesting was there was this thing called affinity fraud, and it happens actually with a lot of religious people, like particularly in the Mormons space. There was this one guy, I think his name was like Ronnie Hall, something like that. And he was in our textbook, and basically what he did was he kind of preyed on his fellow Mormons and said, "Hey, I'm a Mormon like you. We'll go pray in church." Or the LDS, we're going to go pray in the church. And then ultimately speaking, then he started like, he did the kind of like the Ponzi scheme thing where he's like, if you give some money, you'll get a huge return for your money. You know what I mean? And why
Mhm.
wouldn't they trust him?
Mhm.
Because they're from the same religious community, right?
Right,
And
right,
it was
right.
so fascinating and amazing because this happens a lot. Affinity fraud happens a lot, particularly in religious spaces. So a lot of people, and they rationalize it. They're like, I got to pay the bills. I got to take care of my family,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
but it's really fascinating because it's exactly that. You trust people, particularly like in a religious setting. Why would they betray you? Why
Yeah,
would they take your money? You
yeah, yeah,
know, but they do.
yeah.
And there was a great case, like a really powerful case, like our first case. And you can even look her up. This person, she was this person who had a construction company. And her name was like, her name's not Tammy. Her name's Oberlin, something Oberlin. Maybe Nancy Oberlin, but she basically had this construction company, and then her company just started to boom. You know, where she was doing she had lots of like operations like from her construction company, and then
Mhm.
she needed like a secretary, like a person who would keep the books, you know what I mean, like treasurer secretary who would look at all the books. And this person's name was Tammy, and she brought Tammy in. And at first it looked really good, all the books were perfect, but what basically happened was Tammy started to take some of the money, and it started to
Mhm.
become more and more and more, and it ended up being like maybe like millions of dollars that she stole from the company, um, because Miss Oberlin trusted her. So it's like
Mhm.
really this idea of trust, and it's deep, it's deep. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to share that. I think it's really kind of interesting.
Yeah, have you ever heard of, like, there used to be a magazine in, I think it was in Kansas, like, I don't know if it's everywhere. It'd be like the Christian Businesses of Wichita. So it'd be like a magazine that listed all the Christian businesses in town. And so, obviously, if you're like, "Well, I'm gonna only use Christian businesses," you're using that as a shorthand for these businesses are going to be the honest ones or the better ones. They're not gonna rip me off. And so you're really taking a bit of a shortcut there because even if those businesses aren't stealing from you or ripping you off, quote unquote, they're not doing anything like nefarious. Um, they may not be the best choice, right? There may be other businesses that the people that run them aren't Christians, but you're just using the shortcut to be able to do it. Now, is that shortcut a good idea? And if you're not a Christian, you're going to probably think, why, that's no, it's, there's not a lot of good use. I think that non-Christians are just as good. There's nothing special about Christians. So you could see how in that situation, maybe that shortcut's not good, but you could see in situations where you're like, well, I'm not going to have a lot of time to evaluate the situation. So I'm going to be able to use these shortcuts. I think that what people need to think about is when they're dealing with money, especially large sums of their own personal money, we need to be careful about not making these decisions or being weighted to do something based on these shortcuts. We need to take the time. We need to make sure we get in a situation where we have the energy to make a decision rather than go, well, I'm going to pay this company to do my roof. And my only evidence that they're good is they were in the Christian Businesses magazine. You know what I mean? Oh, it's just like a major purchase. You might want to use some deeper reasoning than just some of these shortcuts.
And I think you hit a key too, is that you trust these people. It's not even if they're really skilled at the work. It's like, well, they're from my community, so I can trust them.
Hmm.
So that's really powerful. That's heavy.
Yeah, and another thing is, it is true that like if someone like that I was friends with that went to my church that I knew well, they are less likely to rip me off in the sense that they will see me every week in church. So if they do rip me off, they kind of have to like switch churches or, it's awkward, right? Like they're going to pay a social cost. But what is frustrating is sometimes someone parachutes in from the outside, kind of like you're saying with the situation of Miss Overland, where this person parachutes in, takes all the money, but because they're not like a permanent part of the community, they don't have to pay a big social cost because they're just going to move on, right? And I think of people like on TV. Someone goes on TV, I'm a Christian preacher, I'm a Muslim preacher, or whatever it is. Give me your money. Yes, they get the money. They get all the trust because they're this certain religion, but they don't have to pay the social cost that they've ripped all these people off. They're never going to see these people ever again. You know what I mean? And so I think that's kind of something interesting to consider as well. That there is some use to saying, well, I'm gonna, you know, use someone that is a part of my community. That seems fine, but I think we're too generous with who's part of our community. Does that make sense? Like we're too willing to just say, well, they claim to be a Christian or whatever, so they're one of us. Well, one of us is a horrible way to say it, but there's someone that I can trust.
I completely agree. I think that's a completely valid point.
Yep. Well, Isa, John is here. I only got. I'm going to try to end pretty early, so thank you so much. Do you have anything else? I don't want to kick you off. We can talk for another 5 minutes or so if there's anything else you want to bring up. Otherwise, I'll bring John to the stage.
I'm gonna go. I wanted to make sure I got the woman's name right on the case, just so people will know. Give me 1 second. I just wanted to get that.
Yeah,
To,
sure,
to
sure, no problem.
because I have the book here, so I was like, you know what? I just want to make sure I get that. Let people know because they can look it up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, right. Mhm. Well, while Issa's looking that up, don't be afraid to like, subscribe, all that. I need a shtick like Max has, whatever that is. Like, subscribes, run to some corner, yell, share Mate talks. What I need my own shtick to get down on that. But yeah, to all the social things, as Max likes to say. So
Yeah, okay, I got it. It's D. Randall. D. Randall is the guy who was the Mormon who stole from um from uh from the Mormons. So
yeah,
D. Randall, and the other person is Cheryl Obermiller, Construction
Obermiller.
Services. Yeah, so
Hmm.
it's Obermiller, so not Obermillin. My apologies. It's Cheryl Obermiller with Tammy. So yeah,
Yeah,
Tammy took the money from Cheryl
Tammy
Obermiller.
took the money. Oh man.
All
Well,
right,
Max says, yeah, see you, Issa.
yeah, I'm gonna go
Uh,
teach. I do teach for
sound,
America, so I'm
Sounds
gonna
good.
end it.
We'll see you, Max. Haha, if you borrow mine, I'll teach you. Yes, I apparently need some training, Max. You haven't trained Issa and I well enough on the social spiel. We got to get that memorized. We got to have like a Sherpa Mate channel class on all that. So anyway, well, welcome, John. How's it going?
Yeah, good. You, Dr. J, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good. I've got a new headset. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Good.
sound good. I was gonna say you look good, but I mean, that's probably true too. But no, you sound great.
Not committing to the looking good comment then. It's probably yeah, it was just the what were you talking about with how we use heuristics when it comes to sort of decision making.
Mhm,
And I'm not entirely convinced that we are rational beings. I think
mhm,
we use intuition 99.9% of the time.
mhm,
And then once a decision once we don't actively make a decision. I don't think that's not
mhm.
to say to go down the free will rabbit hole. I think our brains make decisions for us, and then when somebody asks us why we did it, we retrospectively justify it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think
um
it's true. This quick, if we put it in the paradigm of what this chapter is arguing, I think it's true. We use the quick version almost all the time. There's
yeah,
almost never do we ever shift into I'm really going to, evaluate this in some sort of deep way.
yeah, like you don't like you when you're choosing between like the skimmed, the semi-skimmed, and the full fat milk. You don't start putting together a pros and a cons list in your brain and
Hmm.
condense the decision, like start constructing logical syllogisms about whether you're going to do X, Y, or Z. It just doesn't. Brains don't work like that. We have to train ourselves incredibly hard and rigorously in order to get us to think that way, in order to avoid biases. It's why the scientific method is what it is, why logic is what it is, why we use philosophy the way that we do. But it was also the what you and Issa were talking about with regards to trust, and what you were essentially talking about was in groups and out groups, and how applicable trust is. But it's also the case that confidence tricksters, con men, fraudsters, either target groups where there is an inherent level of trust towards them because of the group that they belong to, or they cultivate an artificial environment of trust in order to con you, which is why I tend to lean towards skepticism, whilst trying to not fall into the pit on either side of skepticism, which is just cold hard cynicism.
Right.
But for me, because I run a business, and customers need to trust me because they're handing me tens of thousands of pounds in order to provide construction services. And in a lot of circumstances, they're paying me a deposit well in advance of services actually being received. There's a degree of trust that I'm going to turn up and provide the service that they've requested. So, but the vast majority of the work that I get comes from personal recommendations.
Right.
So I have a customer who has already received services from me, who has recommended me to a third party, and it's not like, and that's a high confidence recommendation. Not just because a friend of a friend has had one of our buildings, but they themselves have had one of our buildings.
Oh,
That's why we work in
that's
the local area.
Yeah, that's significantly high, in my opinion. Is significantly higher, evidence than just saying they're in a magazine that's got the Christian Business Bureau
Yeah,
slapped on
massively
it,
so.
right? Right. Like you're saying, I know someone, or it'd be great if you know a couple people where you had done work for them and it had
Oh,
worked out well, and that is going to be way, way better. You should be persuaded by that, in my opinion. That's much stronger evidence
yeah.
than they got themselves in this magazine.
The analogy to the religious community, like a Christian magazine, for example, like I we live right next door to my children's school. There's 900 kids, 1,800 parents. They're all like walking past my house every day. They're all local. They're all painfully middle class, so they've all got cash on the hip. They've all got sort of like professional. They're all like engineers or whatever. So huge numbers of them work from home, or they're accountants that have home offices. The company I run builds. We do timber frame extensions, garden buildings, home offices, saunas, gyms, that sort of stuff, all highly bespoke. So I've just got a load of advertising boards down in the alleyway down the side of my house that connects the junior school and the infant school together. My kids are in the school, so even if I don't know a parent directly, because my children are in the school, I guarantee I know people that they know. Like it would not behoove me to shit where I eat.
Right.
So
Yep. That's right.
and that to me would be analogous to the like a religious magazine locally that's probably fed into by 3, 4, 5, 6 different churches. Everybody's known to everybody. It's a bit of an insular community. I would still consider that to be high trust.
Yeah, the problem with the magazine wouldn't be it's just everybody knows everybody. It would be too easy to get into. So the Wichita's a
Yeah,
big enough town, it would be hundreds and hundreds of churches. So as a
right.
business, you could literally not even attend church probably and just claim to the magazine you're a Christian and get in. So if you're
Yeah.
talking about like everyone at the school knows me, that is way higher trust. Like you said, if you screw someone there, they're all going to tell you what a terrible person you are, and then you got to take your kid to school every day, and everyone's going to give you the side eye.
Yeah, sort of like trying to avoid eye contact with people
Yeah,
because you
exactly.
built a shit
That
building.
that you want to avoid compared to the person that can get themselves in this magazine with no effort, basically, and then end up ripping people off, but they don't have any social cost to to it at all. Hey, if Max teaching me how to do the social things includes the cat attacks, I'm out. I've been attacked by that cat a few times. It is serious business when cat
I,
decides to go after you.
I don't know what he's doing to like motivate that cat to shred him so
So,
comprehensively.
I've been there. So that cat was just he got him off the street, right? So Max didn't raise the cat. So Max had no part of its training and it's like a full adult now. And that
Right.
cat will go from just sitting on your lap, you can pet him and so on and so forth, but you will just be sitting at the computer doing nothing, just whatever. It'll just go after your feet and its claws dig right into your toes. I mean, I could not find a pattern. I thought, well, maybe the previous owner, I couldn't find a pattern, right? And to be super fair to Max, he inherited all the attacking
Yeah. And I
aspect.
I certainly wasn't accusing Max of doing anything to the cat. It's more just like, are you not feeding it, or you know?
Oh, it went after my feet in bed one time. Like it came into the room and I was sleeping and it attacked my feet. It likes to go for the hands and the feet. So yeah, it's as Max says here, it's a little on the crazy side, and
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. But
But
super cool that Max takes care of it.
with regards to like so for example, like when you're talking about like business, like companies that are essentially advertising, touting for business, would
Hmm.
you consider like somebody's, let's say somebody's in the market for a widget, and there are three different widget companies, and one of them advertises in the Christian magazine and the other two don't, and the customer goes for the company that is in the Christian magazine because they too are Christians. They consider the company part of their in group,
Hmm.
even though, like, for example, one of the other widget companies might actually provide a cheaper product.
Right.
So would you consider that, like,
So this is what I would
where
say.
does changing a mind come into play there?
Yeah,
If that makes sense?
in that particular case, it would highly depend on how much money you were spending. If you were buying something that wasn't that important, I'm not
Yeah,
sure it matters. You could pick the Christian thing if the cost between the two isn't that material for you. But if you're talking about making, a $10,000 purchase or something like that, I think just saying, well, they're $300 cheaper, that's not enough evidence for me to take them necessarily. If you're going to spend 10 grand, if they're
yeah,
just because they're in the Christian Business Magazine isn't enough evidence for me. I would hope that we should try to train ourselves to say, okay, this threshold's really high. This is a lot of money. I should put more effort into this than just these quick heuristics. And so I don't know how to train myself to know when it's a good idea to just I can just rely on his heuristic and it's totally fine because it's a low consequence decision compared to like, no, this is like super super important. I need to put a bunch of effort into it. And actually, ironically, I think it is possible. So I think my brother will not buy things sometimes because he researches it so much that it just paralyzes him and he never buys it. And the item he's
yeah,
buying it's not going to matter. You know what I mean? Whether he buys
yeah.
this one or that one, it's just not that big a deal. Which
Because
speaker you buy doesn't matter that much. He's not some sort of audiophile, right? It doesn't really matter
yeah,
which speaker he gets. So I guess it is possible to think too hard about it, but I would try to make the threshold higher if the consequences were higher, which usually in the purchasing is based on how much money it is. Because you could do something really dangerous and dumb, like people have done, I'm sure, and marry someone based off almost heuristics rather than like really unfortunately laying out the pros and cons, and that can be pretty life alteringly disastrous.
well, I mean, it I mean, in terms of who you're going to choose to marry, I think that's probably a bit of a different one, because not only are you just assessing or making a calculation on who the person is now, um, you know, you're trying to make a judgment on, like, when kids come along and it increases the stress, and
Hmm.
like, there's, if you're buying a product, like a spoon holder remains pretty static. It doesn't really change that much. It's obviously going to age. It's going to tarnish. It's going to get patina to it, as do wives, by the way. Um, it, it's it, Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can.
Well, one way to think about it would be like a way to choose to date someone that you've enjoyed dating is that they're really fun when you go to the bar or something. Like they're just awesome to hang out with. They're just a good time. They're just super fun when you go to the bar. And
Yeah,
you could just love this person and you could really truly love them and like them and spend a lot of time with them. But at some point you might want to say like, okay, over the course of our lifetimes, only a small percentage of our life together is going to be spent doing this kind of activity. Like, should I marry and have kids with a
yeah,
person that when I am doing this once, I absolutely love doing this activity with them, but let's be realistic, it's such a small percentage and the rest of it's a disaster. It's probably not a good idea. Um, and that's why things like I'd say getting married really, really quickly can get you in trouble because you don't have time to sort of probe those other areas. Now, some people get married really
yeah.
quickly and it all works out. You know,
Well,
that person's wonderful
I,
and it works out great. But
I think it depends on your viewpoint of marriage. If the whole point is that marriage is a project and both partners are prepared to make changes and compromises and work together in a way that frankly I just think people aren't prepared to that much in the modern world. Obviously, also historically speaking, marriages were very different in that you had the wife was very much not working at home, taking care of children. There are a lot of options that just weren't on the table. Like you didn't have no fault divorce. There's a lot of stuff going on there, like that's changed culturally and legally. But I, I said to my wife, we were just having it was just years ago, and I said, oh well, all relationships are compromises in the grand scheme of things. And she went, oh, you settled for me then? And I went, no, that's not what I'm saying. And she went, well, of course you are, because you're saying that you compromise. I'm like, okay, let me put it this way, hun. As far as you're concerned, I am perfect in every way, and there is nothing at all that you would change about me whatsoever. And she went, well, I went, so
Yeah,
relationships are,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
whether you can compromise on that thing or whether that thing is uncompromisable for you. And you need to know that. You at least need to take an educated guess on what those things may
E
or may not be. Yeah.
Absolutely, and of course, you're gonna change, and they're gonna change, and 20 years from now, who knows what's gonna happen, right? You
Yeah.
cannot perfectly predict the future, but when you're making that initial decision, sometimes people get married and 6 months in, they're like, "That was a bad idea." This isn't a great this didn't work out so well. There's not much you can do that, I mean, if you get married and one person's really religious and they both are, let's say, and then one person decides not to be religious anymore, well, when you got married, you couldn't predict that, right? Like you didn't obviously both of you thought you were going to be religious forever. And so you wouldn't have been able to anticipate that change.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so you can't predict the future on
it,
that.
it's again, I think like in the UK, there's like the UK compared to the US, it's there's a big difference there in that um, the vast majority of people in the UK who say that they are quote unquote religious or a Christian, they're sort of like a Church of England Protestant that will
Hmm.
probably go to like the Christingle service or the Easter service, but they're sure as shit not sat in the pews every Sunday. So if you've got the and I know it's going to be the same in the US, but there's going to be the same sort of type of person in the US who says that they're religious and they just go to the big events. They're not there every week.
Hmm.
Um, but we have sort of been religiously neutered in the UK
Hmm.
for quite some time, and this sort of Church of England Protestantism is very, very, very. I don't want to say lazy religion, but
Hmm.
it, like for example, we don't really have the contention around gay marriage in church in the same way as they do in the United States.
Hmm.
The Church of England went, well, yeah, okay, fine. I mean, it's just up to the individual priest. If they want to marry gay people in their church, it's fine. We're not going to stop them. And that was kind of that's kind of where it's been left. If you tried to do that in some parts of the US, you it'd be absolutely catastrophic. But I
Yeah,
guess,
'cause the type I'm obviously talking about, there are, I mean, maybe it's just where I grew up and the background I have. There are many people in America that would never marry someone that also wasn't very religious. So like,
Yeah.
if this guy doesn't attend church regularly or girl doesn't attend regularly, I mean weekly, every, not missing unless it's like a special, you're on vacation or something, they would not marry them. That's what I'm talking about. So if you
Hasn't-
imagine two people like that getting married, they're going to church together every Sunday, they're tithing, they're participating, they're sending their kids to Sunday school, they're doing all the stuff, and then one of them says, I'm not doing that anymore. That's what I was saying, is you could never have anticipated that when you got married. And then you
Yeah.
have to decide what you're going to do, because the person who doesn't want to go to church, are they just going to say, well, I'll continue to go
So
and
are
fake
you
it, or
are
what's
you are you envisaging sort of like a Matt Dillahunty complete 180 type behavioral change within a relationship? Like you've been married for 10 years, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're like, let's say for argument's sake, Matt Dillahunty got married when he was deep in his religious, like he was like a religious apologist, and then he wakes, his head springs off the pillow one morning and he goes, this is bullshit, and then he just
Yeah.
goes to completely the opposite direction.
Yeah, things like that can happen in marriage. I think the religion one's easy to understand, but other things can change too. You used to love to travel. We love to travel together. I still love to travel. You don't want to go anywhere now. What happened? You know what I mean? Like, am I going to decide I'm never going to travel as well because you've changed your thoughts on that? These are the decisions you have to make. But when you make that initial decision, you certainly want to make it the best you can and not just rely on heuristics. As much as you can. But John, I've got to go. I've got a meeting
no
at
worries.
1. I've got to prep for. So glad you joined. I know I did it on a Wednesday this week because I'm moving. I do house sitting, and this house sit is done. And so I'll be back in the Midwest for a while and then go to Texas. So who knows? I'll have a cat, but I think the cat I'm babysitting in Texas is like 14 years old and isn't going to attack me. So maybe I'll show my cat when I get there, but I think it's going to be pretty tame.
Well, we've got 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and 5 chickens. So they're too busy attacking one another that they sort of leave me
They don't
alone.
bother you, yeah. That's what Max needs. He needs another cat, so that way they just go after each other's feet. So cool. All right, good to see you, John, and hopefully we'll get to talk
You
again.
too. See you later.